The second topical resolution on Concentrix will be proposed by Tasmina Ahmed-Sheikh and seconded by Eilidh Whiteford. Welcome, Tasmina.
Thank you very much indeed, Derek. Conference, 2 months ago, my fantastic staff in my Alloa office began receiving phone calls and emails from single mothers and fathers across Perthshire, Kinrossshire and Clackmannanshire who'd had their tax credit payments stopped without warning for no good reason. Their circumstances were very similar. They had been penalised by Concentrix, a company who'd been contracted by HMRC to administer the tax credits process. Concentrix said that they believed another adult was living in the house and they were no longer eligible for payment. What was shocking and bizarre about these accusations were how clearly wrong they were. Women were accused of living with the son of the family next door or the previous tenant in their flat. Or in one case highlighted by the media, a 19-year-old single mum was accused of being in a current relationship with a 76-year-old former neighbour who had died some months before. For their payments to be reinstated, they would need to appeal this decision and send HMRC proof of their status with a range of new documentation, a year's worth of bank statements, letters from their landlords, proof of their address and relationship status, which they were to pay for out of their own pocket to prove their innocence. So I did what any decent local MP would do. I raised it in Parliament, I asked questions, wrote letters. My team called HMRC every day to chase up actions that were promised but not yet delivered. We did everything possible to help these parents in need, because that's our job, and that's what you can expect from each and every one of our SNP MPs. And what I was told directly across the House of Commons chamber by the Minister in charge was that they've solved the problem and it would now only take 4 working days to get money to those who were wrongly penalised. We're now 4 weeks on from this conference, but my constituents are still calling me, desperate and increasing material hardship because of the mistakes of others and a failure of the Tory government to prioritise their growing plight. They're now telling me things will be resolved as soon as possible. So to the Tory ministers in the Treasury, I say this: soon doesn't put food on the table, soon doesn't pay for phone credit, and soon doesn't explain to a child why the tooth fairy didn't come last night. These people are desperate. I know families, Conference, who didn't send their children to school last week because they didn't have lunch money. I know of a nurse who's in danger of losing her job because she can't afford childcare. I've heard of a mum who's so worried about her situation, she signed herself out of hospital with a suspected heart attack so she could fix the mess and protect her family. This shameful situation is a national disgrace. The Tories' inability to sort this out shows a lack of competence, a lack of compassion and an utter lack of political will. They're leaving families in dire financial and emotional mess. The Tory government must act now to pay these families what's rightfully theirs and provide compensation for the innocent constituents who've been penalised because of the mistakes of others. So for Jane and her kids, for Graham and his family, and for Debbie and our loved ones who've been plunged into poverty, Theresa May, sort this out now. Please support the motion. Thank you.
Thank you, Tasmina. And to second, Eilidh Whiteford, MP. Welcome back, Eilidh.
Conference, I think this Concentrix debacle reminds us all exactly why dignity and respect need to be at the very heart of our social security system. And I'm so glad and so determined that the Scottish Government is doing just that with the powers that are coming to it in the weeks and months ahead. But, Conference, it is simply not acceptable for an agency employed by government to make wild, groundless fraud allegations against women in receipt of tax credits to which they are perfectly entitled, and to stop people's payments without a shred of evidence or substantiation. Let's just remind ourselves for a moment what tax credits are and who they're for. Tax credits are mostly paid to working parents of dependent children to top up low earnings and bring household incomes up to an acceptable level. Tax credits help ensure that children whose parents work in low-paid jobs don't grow up in poverty. And single parents where there's only one wage in the house are particularly in receipt of tax credits because they are more likely to be in poverty and more likely to have parents who are having to struggle to juggle work and family commitments. In Scotland, though, around half of all families with children receive tax credits, reflecting the fact that the minimum wage is not a living wage and that many parents, particularly women, work part-time when their bairns are wee. Women also tend to be overrepresented in low-paid jobs and still earn less than men on average. So the majority of those in receipt of tax credits are women, and most of them are working mums. To my mind, the actions of Concentrix have been quite disgraceful and nothing short of scandalous. Women have simply had their payments stopped, sometimes with no explanation or warning, but sometimes accompanied by spurious allegations about their personal lives. And I'm sure many of you will also have seen the media reports of some of the more ridiculous accusations, such as the woman living above a newsagent's shop who was accused of having a bidey-in called R.S. McCall. Or the woman in Yorkshire who is a tenant of a housing association that was endowed by a Quaker philanthropist in the Victorian era. She was accused of being in a relationship with a Mr. Joseph Rowntree. But actually, it's extremely serious. My colleague, Chris Law MP, who first raised this issue in Parliament, has a constituent in Dundee who has lost her home. She was depending on tax credits, like so many others, to pay rent. And unlike in social housing, where you can maybe have rent arrears without the landlord taking immediate punitive action, for people in private sector rented accommodation, often there is no debate if you're not able to pay your rent. And the consequences of that for that family and thousands like them are absolutely enormous. Many other people are now depending on food parcels, resorting to expensive lending, payday loans, etc., just to get by until they believe they can sort this out. People are depending on tax credits to pay their rent and put food on the table, and losing that income without warning, due process or just cause is causing untold distress and hardship to thousands of families. It's quite disgraceful that this incompetent fishing exercise has been allowed to continue and that the UK government has failed to reinstate payments for these families as they said they would within the time frame they promised. Well, let me send a very clear message. The SNP MPs in Westminster will hold the government to account on this issue, and we will continue to press for immediate action now, to put this right. They also need to explain how this was allowed to happen in the first place. What on earth were they thinking? And when will they stop putting women and children on the front line of their failed austerity agenda? Conference, please support this resolution and send a strong message to the UK government that they simply cannot treat people in this way.
Thank you, Eilidh. There are no cards in against the resolution. I'm sorry I can't call any further speakers. Tasmina, are you okay to waive your right to sum up? You are, thank you. Can I ask for the last time, Conference, is the resolution passed by acclaim? It is. Thank you very much. That concludes our debates.